Hello, testing psychologist. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's a business episode. It is the first episode in a two-part mini-series on scaling and growth. So I'm talking today about whether or not you should grow or you should hold steady. This is a little bit of a live question for me, as it has been many times over the years. And I think it's pretty relevant for a lot of folks out there, just based on content from my consulting calls and mastermind groups. A lot of people are thinking about this. Do you grow? Do you hold steady? Do you stay solo? So I'm going to dive in today to talk about this topic and try to figure out, or at least give you some bit of a rubric, I suppose, to work from to decide whether you should grow or just hold steady where you're at. So if this is a question that you've thought about or might be top of mind for you, then stay tuned. Let's talk about it. All right, y'all. We are here and we are talking about growing or holding steady. Like I said, I've been through this cycle more than once, many times, to be honest. That whole cycle of expanding and right sizing and realizing that growth doesn't necessarily always equal success, but sometimes it can be really awesome. And honestly, this is, like I said, kind of a live issue for me right now because we are, like many other people, having a hard time hiring. And so our wait list has just grown steadily over the last several months. We are booking more than we have capacity for. I'll talk about capacity in the next episode in the mini series, but we're just booking further and further out, and people are starting to decline to book with us because the wait list is just too long. So I want to talk through the signs that it might be time to scale up and hire, and equally important signs that it might be smarter to stay right where you are. So first section here, signs that it might be time to grow. So as I mentioned just a minute ago, there's a capacity question here. That is one of the first things that you could look toward to know if it is time to grow. And there are a few layers to determining capacity. I actually did a whole episode just on capacity and using an equation or math-based approach to hiring, simply based on what do you have the capacity for, and are you booking more than that capacity? So to bring it to life here in our practice, I know that we have the capacity for, let's call it 20 evaluations a week. And since we track all of our intake bookings each week, I know that we are booking on average 23.1 intakes a week for the last several months. And so in that sense, we have the capacity for 20, we're booking 23. So that is essentially like every week we're booking an extra 3 evaluations, and that's just going to stack and stack and stack and make the wait list longer and longer. So if you're not tracking if you don't have a good sense of your capacity, that's step one, figure that out. And then the second component of that is tracking your bookings. So you actually know whether you're booking more than you have the capacity for or not. And if we want to go all the way back to the beginning to determining capacity, that is really anchored in having a good sense of your schedule and booking a set number of intakes per week rather than just fitting them in haphazardly wherever you might have time. Because if you do that, it's really hard to, track that capacity versus bookings question. So lots of components there. But like I said, that is a green light. If you are exceeding your capacity consistently over 3 to 6 months, I think that's a good time to consider expanding. Okay. So this means that you've got a steady flow of referrals. It's not just a seasonal bump. And presumably, this is extending your wait list out further and further over that 3 to 6 month period. Another green light, I suppose, even though it's a bit of a yellow light in a sense, is that, your wait list is long enough that it's affecting client care or the reputation. Okay. So, people have different thresholds for this in terms of what's a reasonable wait list. I hear everything from 1 to 2 months up to 6 to 8 months. And then once you get in the range of, say, 10 to 12 plus months, then we are competing in a sense with most children's hospitals and other larger entities that are kind of overwhelmed. And so there's a huge variability here, but this can come directly from your admin team and any other sources that you might be drawing on to know if people are declining to book because the wait list is so long. You can also gauge this based on the reputation in the community, and if people are reaching out and asking, "Hey, why are you booking so far out?" or "We need to get people in sooner," things like that. Another green light, this is maybe one of the most important, is just financially knowing that you have a cushion. So when you hire somebody, it's not going to be an immediate ROI on your investment, so to speak. Now, there are ways to structure it where you pay that person on a ramp up, where they get paid hourly for the first several weeks while they build up their caseload. You do have to pay them for training, though, in most cases, especially if you're doing a W-2 model. So there's going to be some amount of cash outlay before you get revenue coming in. This also applies if you're an insurance-based practice and you have a delay between services rendered and payment being completed. So a lot of factors to consider here. I like to ballpark 3 to 6 months of the expenses and systems cost to support a new employee before you hire. So you can total up, what's it going to cost to run this person in the EHR and add them to Google Workspace and their salary, of course, and their hourly or their hourly wage and the training time. You can calculate all of those things and figure out whether you have that little cushion in place, because you're going to quote unquote lose money for the first, I don't know, probably 2 to 3 months before their revenue really starts to pick up. So, like I said, this is a real time question for me. We are seeing clients turn us down because the wait is just too long. So, for me, this is a clear indicator that something has to shift. Okay. So, either we increase our capacity or we risk kind of underserving the community. Now, on the flip side, we can talk about signs to hold steady in your practice. Okay. So, growth is not always the answer. I talked a lot about my journey over the last, year and a half at this point, as far as, right sizing our practice, scaling way back, finding joy in the work, that kind of thing. So, like I said, this is personal. I've thought about it a lot over the last several months. And so, growth is not always the answer, despite what you might think. Here are some red flags that can tell you that it might be better to pause before you grow, even if it feels like you're turning down business, right? One, you're just feeling burned out, stretched thin. You're not finding much joy in the work. These are all pretty relevant factors for me as the director of a pretty large practice about a year and a half ago. So just tuning in for yourself and getting some sense of how you are functioning emotionally, and whether I come back to this word joy a lot, and maybe it's overplayed, but I really like it. I think it really captures, not that every single moment in your work should be joyful, but I'm a big fan of the 80-20 rule, and you should feel pretty good about 80% of the time when you go into work. And so if you don't identify with that term burnout, or think that's maybe played out a little bit, go the other direction and think, like, how much joy am I experiencing in this work? And if that's fading, that's maybe a sign not to continue to hire and grow your practice. Another red flag, I come back to this a lot and talk to people about this a lot in consulting meetings, is just those core systems. So if you have any cracks in your SOPs, your policies, your procedures, your software. So this is like, billing, scheduling, report writing, all those things along the client journey. If any of those aspects are still pretty shaky, like if I were to come to you and say, like, map out your client journey and tell me exactly who does what when throughout the client journey and what the kind of standard procedure for each step along the way is. If you can't answer that question, or you say something like, well, I have it in my head, but it's not written down, or, I know how to do it, I just tell people along the way. Or if you're kind of questioning or kind of stumbling over that answer, that's a pretty good sign. You should not hire. Just being honest, and again, from personal experience, I think of SOPs as and procedures and policies as like a dam, like a really strong dam that is kind of holding the water of your practice in place and keeping it, where it's supposed to be. And anytime these core systems are shaky, those are like cracks in the dam. And the more people you hire, the more water you put behind the dam, and the more pressure ends up on these cracks, and eventually things can break and fall apart. So if you have any shakiness in your core systems, that's certainly a red flag, or at least a pink flag to pay real close attention to and shore up. Now, again, you don't have to have absolutely everything mapped out. Nothing is perfect, and systems are always evolving. But if you don't have a pretty good sense, again, like 80/20, these policies are in place and you at least know where the gaps are and what you need to fix, I would call that a red flag for sure. All right. Last red flag I'm going to talk about here could have a series of episodes dedicated to it, but this is the idea, again, tuning into yourself and recognizing that you are just growing because you feel like you should, quote unquote. Now, this might be because other people are doing it. It might be because you see these, practice consultants, influencers, so to speak, on social media. I don't actually know if that's a thing or not, if we have influencers in our space. But you see people on social media who have grown their practice and, it looks like it's working really well. Other component is, is this your ego that's pushing you in this direction? So just this idea of kind of tapping into yourself and thinking, what is driving this for me? And this is something, again, I know this like all too well. From probably 2019 to 2022, we grew very rapidly, partly due to the COVID boom, I think that everybody experienced. Um, and for us, it was kind of an interesting journey. I feel like we had a lot of the practical, kind of logistical systems and software and that kind of thing in place, but it was really the leadership team and leadership skills, for myself and for others, and the supervisory component. And I just don't think we were ready for that leap. And so, you know, this is one of those cases again, kind of overlooking a pretty important system and role set of roles in the practice. And so we ended up like really overwhelmed with managing people and policies and things like that. So now looking back, I mean, I can see that I was really just reacting to the demand and letting, I think, my ego sort of drive the bus. Growth felt like the right thing to do because it equaled success, quote unquote, and accomplishments and admiration, and it was fuel for the podcast, even to kind of say, managing this larger practice, and there was a lot wrapped up in that for me. But underneath it all, I think it was all honestly just like scarcity and, wanting more and more and more and thinking that I had to hire more to make more money. And, that combination just led to, I think, decisions that weren't sustainable. So I guess taking, all of that together, basically doing an ego check and getting a sense of why, why do you want to grow? The last thing I want to talk about is just, continuing with that theme. It's kind of like a mindset check for you. So I think mindset is huge in this whole process. And it's this question of like, are you kind of chasing growth from a place of abundance because you truly, when you really sit down with yourself, you truly want more impact or more freedom or more revenue? Or are you acting from, again, this place of scarcity or fear that if you don't grow, then you're going to lose these referral sources, or business is going to dry up, or you're going to fall behind other practices, or something like that. So, over the years, I've made both kinds of decisions, and I will say the scarcity driven ones usually cost more, both financially and emotionally. So this is just a gentle reminder, I suppose, from having a little bit of hindsight in this process to say, hey, do a mindset check and just kind of see where you're at and what's really driving you here. So you all know me. I like to be pretty practical whenever possible. And so I'm going to end with a little practical reflection. So if you are driving, if you are working out, if you're walking, if you're out and about, maybe this is you take out your notes app and talk into it or something like that. If you're sitting around, you can actually write this down. But here's the prompt. I would love for you to reflect on this question and journal, quote unquote, or however you might want to record it. So the question is, if your practice stayed exactly the same size for the next 12 months, how would that feel? All right. If your practice stayed exactly the same size for the next 12 months, how would that feel? And for me personally, I did this, to prepare for the podcast, but I found that the answer is mixed, to be honest. So from a team and personnel standpoint, I would feel totally okay. I think we have great cohesion right now, and the team is working really well, and we're kind of clicking along. But on the flip side, I would feel pretty bad if we continued to just book further and further out, increasing our wait time and kind of doing a disservice to our community. So, in this particular season, this is where I'm looking toward a little more growth to hire one or two other folks to come alleviate our wait list a bit and hopefully join our team and become a fantastic team member. So those are my reasons for pushing toward growth in this season. And of course, checking in, do I have the capacity for this? How will this affect the team? It's good to come from more of a grounded place, I think, in making that decision. The second component of this, if you want to, you can do a quick financial audit. Do you make sure you have those operating expenses in place if you were to hire? And if not, growing will probably just add more stress than it solves, especially in the short term. So that's it for this first part of the Scaling and Growth series. Next time, we're going to talk about the how. Okay, so kind of hiring versus optimizing. So digging in a little bit further, if you have decided you want to hire, I'm actually going to question that just a bit and try to figure out if you really need to hire or if there is some optimizing that you could do for your current team. And it's a better choice to go that way. So if you're right in the middle of these decisions, I'm always happy to chat with folks via strategy session. There are more mastermind cohorts starting in January, but if you want to jump on a call, happy to talk this through. You can go to thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting. And thank you as always for being here.